Do you think you know what survival is? Do you believe that the river means freedom and the boat is a faithful friend? You are wrong. Welcome to the life of a native boatman, a relentless hell on earth, where every new day is no different from the last, and the only reward for perseverance is the right to suffer again tomorrow. Here, cold becomes a part of your body, food is a curse, neighbors are enemies, and death is the only true relief. But before you get comfortable, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you are watching from and what time it is there. I'm genuinely curious to see who has joined us. Now, get comfortable. We're about to begin. You awaken before the first traces of dawn, not because you want to, but because the ache in your body will not let you rest. The ground beneath you is a slab of ancient, unforgiving earth, made only slightly less brutal by the thin, scraggly layer of moss and last year's leaves that barely cushions your back. The fur you cling to is a relic of a long dead bear, now patchy and stiff with age, riddled with tiny holes that let in more cold than they keep out. This fur stinks of old blood, rancid sweat, and the river's unshakable dampness, a scent so familiar you do not even wrinkle your nose anymore. You know better than to hope for comfort. As you slowly force your eyes open, you realize that your limbs are numb and tingling, your joints stiff from a night spent curled like a frightened animal. Your breath clouds in front of your face, heavy and visible in the frozen air, and for a moment you watch it dissipate, wishing you could vanish along with it. There is no luxury of a morning routine. You have not known what it means to stretch leisurely or to yawn in the comfort of a warm bed. Instead, you lie perfectly still, weighing whether it is worth the pain to move at all. Eventually, the answer is always the same. If you do not move, you do not live. Outside your meager shelter, the world is equally uninviting. The air is so cold it bites the inside of your nose and cuts your lips as you breathe. Even the river nearby is quiet, as if the water itself is reluctant to move beneath the thin skin of ice that formed overnight. Somewhere, you hear the distant caw of a raven. That, too, sounds like a warning. Do not expect anything good from this day. The fire, if you could call it that, is little more than a pile of smoldering embers. Its warmth is long gone, and the charred wood is too damp to revive without a battle. You poke at it anyway, with hands already raw and chapped, but the effort is mostly symbolic. Smoke stings your eyes and makes you cough, but the cold stays exactly where it is, inside your bones. You pull yourself to a sitting position, wrapping the bear fur tighter around your shoulders. Your stomach aches with the slow, dull pain of hunger that never really goes away. The last time you felt full was so long ago, you are not sure if you ever did. You remember stories told in whispers around fires that burned brighter and longer than yours ever will, about the times when food was abundant and life was easier. These stories are lies, or at best, the kind of half truths that old people use to torment the young. Your feet are the last to leave the warmth of the fur. When you place them on the earth, The sensation is sharp, like stepping on a broken glass. The grass is rummed with frost, your footprints visible as you stagger upright. Your knees crack, your back groans. You are not old, not yet, but every morning feels as though you have aged another year. You peer into the gloom of your shelter, little more than a lean to of rotting wood and animal skins, all of them picked apart by insects and weather. The few possessions you have are laid out around you, each one a testament to disappointment. There are your fishing lines, knotted and fraying, your battered paddle, and of course, your boat. Your boat waits for you at the edge of the river, looking as weary and untrustworthy as you feel, but it is all you have. There is no time to linger, no moment to savor. You know what the day demands. You must leave the fleeting safety of your shelter and head to the river, where you will face the cold anew. You will climb into your leaking, creaking boat, and you will try to wrest a living from the water, as you did yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. You will do this not because you want to, but because there is nothing else to do. Your ancestors may have sung about the glory of the river, but you know it for what it is, a cold, indifferent thing, as likely to take your life as to give you another meal. So you stand up, you gather your meager tools, you tighten your belt over a belly that has almost forgotten what it feels like to be full. You force yourself to smile at your own reflection in a pool of icy water, but the smile is more of a grimace. The day has begun, and you are already tired of it. You leave your shelter behind, or rather, it spits you out, as if even it cannot stand to hold your company for another moment. Your feet shuffle over the brittle grass, and every step is a small act of desperation. The morning is not so much a beginning as it is a continuation of the same endless, grinding ordeal that started, for you, sometime between your first memory and your first real disappointment. You are no stranger to the sensation in your belly, a slow, coiling ache that gnaws at your insides and reminds you, every waking moment, of how little the world cares for your suffering. You have not eaten since the day before yesterday, or perhaps the day before that. It hardly matters anymore. Hunger is your oldest companion, more faithful than any lover, friend, or even the river itself. It wakes you, walks beside you, and curls up inside you at night, pressing sharp elbows against your ribs. This morning is no different. There is nothing to eat. There was nothing to eat last night, and there is unlikely to be anything to eat this evening, unless fortune finally decides to acknowledge your existence, which, if history is any guide, is as likely as the river freezing solid in midsummer. You cast your eyes around your small world, searching for anything that could be called food. There are a few shriveled berries, black and useless, that the birds have not bothered with. A strip of old, dried meat is buried somewhere beneath your sleeping furs, but you already chewed it to the consistency of wet bark 2 nights ago, wringing the last bit of taste from it until your jaw ached and your teeth hurt. You have gnawed on roots, chewed on bark, even once tried to eat a handful of moss when you were young and still foolish enough to hope. Now you know better. Moss is just another lie the forest tells. You move to your battered pouch, opening it with fingers that do not want to bend. You tip it upside down and shake it, but all that falls out is dust and disappointment. You wonder, idly, if you could swallow the dust, if it would trick your stomach into believing it had been fed. You almost laugh at the thought, but you are too tired for laughter. Hunger has a way of making everything seem equally possible and equally pointless. There is nothing to be gained by standing around. You must go to your boat, for the river is the only thing that might still pity you, even if its pity is cruel and unpredictable. Your hands fumble with your nets, each one mended so many times that it is more knot than string. The fibers bite into your skin, which is cracked and raw from the cold. Your stomach growls, a low, miserable sound, like an animal that has given up the hunt. It is not just food for yourself you are seeking. You think of your family, back in the lean to, still sleeping or pretending to sleep, curled up together for warmth. Their faces come to you with aching clarity, your mate's eyes hollow with exhaustion, the small, trusting faces of your children, too young to understand that there is nothing left to hope for. You have seen their ribs through their skin. You have seen them look away when you fail to bring home anything more than a few miserable scraps. The weight of their hunger presses on you, heavier than any stone, heavier even than your own emptiness. You try not to remember the taste of real food. You try not to remember what it was like to eat until you were full, to wipe grease from your mouth, to laugh with a mouth full of meat. You tell yourself that those memories are not yours, that they belong to someone else, in another world, in another lifetime. Now, there is only the ache and the slow, humiliating ritual of trying to fill it. You kneel by the river, cupping a handful of water to your lips. It is bitter and shockingly cold, and for a moment, it tricks your stomach into thinking it has been given something. The relief is fleeting. You rise, tasting the iron tang of your own cracked lips, and look out across the water. Somewhere under its surface, fish move in sluggish schools, as hungry as you, as desperate to survive. You wonder if, in some other world, you might have pitied them. Here, you only hate them for being alive. You drag your boat toward the riverbank, the sound of it scraping over stones as familiar to you as your own heartbeat. Your fingers tremble with fatigue, or maybe it is just the cold. You try not to think about how weak you feel, how light your limbs have grown, how each movement is harder than the last. Hunger makes everything heavier, the boat, the oar, your thoughts. You tell yourself that you only need to make it to the end of this day. You will worry about tomorrow when it comes. But you know, deep down, that tomorrow will be just like today. Hunger is not a problem you solve. It is a burden you carry every hour, every minute. You push your boat into the water, climb in with aching muscles, and begin to row. The river opens up before you, wide and indifferent, promising nothing. Behind you, your shelter sits in the gloom, and inside it, your family waits, hoping you will return with something to fill their bellies, even if it is only hope itself, thin and unsatisfying as a mouthful of river water. And so your day truly begins, not with breakfast, not with warmth, but with the slow, grinding certainty that hunger will follow you wherever you go, as faithful and cruel as any shadow. You row into the mist, and the river swallows you whole. You stumble down the muddy bank, the world turning from blue dawn to the dull, bruised gray of morning proper. The air smells of cold water, rot, and something metallic. In songs and stories, the river is described as a ribbon of life, a gentle mother that nourishes and protects. If only the river's waters matched the words. For you, the river is just another adversary, only slightly less cruel than hunger and just as indifferent. Your feet sink into the mud, which clings to your ankles and tugs at you with every step, as though the earth itself is trying to reclaim your bones. You do not blame it. The ground is never truly dry here, only wet in varying degrees of misery. The stains on your legs will never wash out. You gave up caring about that a long time ago. Mud gets everywhere, under your fingernails, in the seams of your clothes, in your hair, in the cracks of your dry, aching skin. The mud is a constant, stubborn companion, but at least it is not pretending to be anything else. You approach your boat, which waits for you exactly where you left it, half submerged, leering at you like a battered old dog that cannot decide whether to bite or whimper. You remember when it was new. The wood was smooth and light, still smelling of sap and hard labor. Now, the planks are warped and splintered, leaking from a dozen places. You have stuffed old moss and strips of hide into the gaps, a daily ritual, but the river always finds a way in. The boat smells of mildew and despair. You are surprised it floats at all. In truth, it barely does. The river itself is silent. Not the poetic silence of peace, but the silence of a predator waiting in ambush. The current is not particularly strong, but it is unpredictable, swirling and tugging beneath the surface in ways that can flip a careless boat or drag an unlucky soul beneath the reeds. Sometimes logs drift by, ghostly and half rotten, bristling with fungus and memories of storms. Sometimes they are not logs at all, but something darker, heavier, covered in river slime and tangled hair. You have learned not to look too closely at anything that floats. The ice on the water is only a thin skin, already cracked by the weak sun and your own careless footfalls. The cold seeps into your bones, crawling up your legs and into your chest. The water's edge is treacherous. Sometimes it is soft and yielding. Sometimes it is as hard as stone and just as unforgiving. Last year, you watched a man slip, fall, and vanish under the ice. He did not come up again, at least not where anyone could see. You wonder sometimes how many of you the river has taken, how many stories end in silence beneath its sluggish waves. Your first task is to check the boat for new leaks. There are always new leaks. You kneel in the icy mud, your knees protesting, and run your hands along the bottom of the hull. They come away damp, streaked with rot, and some sticky black ooze that may or may not be alive. You try not to think about it. There is nothing to be done except stuff in more moss, wrap another strip of hide around the worst holes, and pray the river's hunger is not stronger than your own. You remember a time when you thought your boat was your ticket to freedom, a means to escape the suffocating dullness of the camp. Now, it is just another prison, floating instead of standing still. You heft your battered paddle, its handle worn smooth by years of desperate hands. The blade is chipped, more patch than wood, but it is all you have. The current is unpredictable, and sometimes you are forced to fight just to keep from being dragged backward, deeper into the marshes where the water stinks and the mosquitoes swarm thick enough to choke a man. The river is not a path, it is a gauntlet littered with half sunken trees, rocks that hide just below the surface, and swirling pools that can spin your boat in circles until you are dizzy, lost, and cursing everything that ever led you to this moment. You push off from the shore, the boat groaning as if in protest. The world tilts. For a heartbeat, you think you will go under, and your heart races in your chest. But the boat rights itself, settling into its familiar, miserable sway. Water immediately begins to seep in around your feet, cold as a corpse's hand. You ignore it. There is nothing to be done. The morning mist rises off the river, shrouding the world in a thick gray curtain. You are alone here, but not in any pleasant sense. It is a solitude born of necessity, not choice, a reminder that out here, every mistake is your own, and every consequence will be suffered in private. No one will help you if you capsize. No one will even know you are gone until your boat washes up, empty and broken, or until the ravens gather in the trees above your abandoned camp. You paddle forward, arms already aching. The river gurgles beneath you, never quite still, never quite silent. Somewhere ahead, a splash marks the place where a fish, your quarry, your hope, breaks the surface for a split second before vanishing again. You think of poetry, of the songs your ancestors once sang about the river, about beauty and bounty and the eternal flow of life. You try to remember the words, but they ring hollow. The only song the river sings to you is the song of struggle. You glance back at the shore, at your little camp hunched in the trees. It already seems impossibly far away. The boat creaks and shudders, threatening to betray you with every motion. You imagine, for a moment, simply letting go of the paddle, letting the river take you wherever it will. But you know better. The river does not take you anywhere you want to go. It only offers you two choices: fight to stay alive, or let go and sink. There is nothing poetic about that. You keep paddling, muscles burning, the taste of hunger and the bite of cold settling into your bones. The river stretches ahead, indifferent and endless, promising nothing but more of the same. You wonder, not for the first time, if anyone will ever write a song about you, about the man who fought the river every day and lost and then fought it again the next morning because there was nothing else left to do. You reach your boat and pause, staring at it with the kind of bleak affection one reserves for the most unreliable members of the family. If a boat could feel, yours would almost certainly resent you for dragging it out each day. Maybe it does. It certainly groans and creaks enough to sound alive, and always in the most ominous moments. You have owned this boat for many years, though owned is perhaps too optimistic a word. You inherited it from a cousin who vanished during an early thaw, and before that it belonged to an uncle who drowned one spring. The boat always comes back, even if its owner does not. Up close, the boat is even more pathetic than it looked from the camp. Once, it might have been beautiful. The wood used to be pale and clean, caressed by clever hands. Now, every inch is scarred, gouged, or slicked with a mysterious green black film that never quite dries. The bottom has warped so many times that the planks have begun to bow away from each other, leaving gaps big enough for all the river's miseries to sneak through. You have patched it again and again with moss, old scraps of hide, even a section of a ruined basket once, but nothing ever holds for long. Sometimes you try to remember what it felt like to step into a sturdy new boat, one that rode high on the water and answered each movement of the paddle with obedient speed. That memory is a taunt now. Your boat sags in the middle, half heartedly resisting the river's urge to swallow it. You suspect there are creatures living in the cracks between the planks, and at least two generations of spiders have claimed the bow as their ancestral home. The paddle rests across the seats, worn to a smooth sheen by so many desperate hands that you are sometimes surprised there is anything left of it at all. Before you even step inside, you check for leaks. This is less a matter of hope than of ritual. You know there are leaks. You only hope they have not grown overnight. Your fingers run over the wet, spongy edges, poking at mossy plugs and bits of fur. One spot oozes river water the moment you press on it, sending a slow, icy trickle toward your feet. You sigh and look for another patch of moss, knowing that by evening you will be sitting in a pool of cold water, cursing yourself for not finding a better fix. You pick up the paddle and test its weight, as if expecting it to suddenly shatter into splinters. You once thought about making a new paddle or even a new boat, but the wood for such a thing is hard to come by, and your hands are always too tired, your days always too short. There are never enough hours between sunrise and sunset, and never enough strength left over from survival to spare for hope. Climbing into the boat is an act of faith and a test of balance. You step in gingerly, feeling the whole thing lurch and groan beneath you. For a moment, you freeze, half expecting to be dumped into the freezing water. The boat steadies itself, but you know better than to trust it. Your every movement must be careful, measured, and slow. You have seen what happens when people get careless. A single misplaced step, a careless shift in weight, and the river claims another fool. Sometimes the boat flips. Sometimes it just fills silently until it sinks out from under you, dragging you down with it. Inside, the bottom is already wet. You kneel and scoop out what water you can with a hollowed gourd, but more seeps in as soon as you turn your back. There are stains everywhere, from fish blood, old meals, and accidents you try not to remember. The smell is appalling, an unholy mix of rot, wet fur, and whatever it is that grows between the planks. You have learned to ignore it, the way you have learned to ignore the constant itch of parasites or the persistent ache in your belly. If you let yourself care, you would go mad before you ever caught a single fish. You glance at the handful of gear you keep in the boat, a fishing line with knots like tumors, a net you have mended so often it looks more like a basket, a crude spear carved from a stick, and the bag of moss you use for patching holes. Every item is a relic of past failures and desperate improvisations. Nothing works as it should. Nothing ever does. The river laps at the sides, testing the boat with gentle, deceptive strokes. The water here is shallow enough to see the stones below, each one slimy and sharp. If you capsize, you will cut yourself before you even get cold. You try not to think about it. You try not to think about anything except the slow, necessary routine of getting the boat moving. You shove off with the paddle, bracing yourself as the boat slides out into the current. It wobbles alarmingly, threatening to spin or tip, but you keep your weight low and your movements slow. The boat is your worst friend, unreliable, always threatening to betray you, but absolutely necessary. You hate it, but you need it. There is a strange intimacy in your hatred, the kind that grows only in long, unhappy relationships. As you settle into your place, you become aware of every sound: the distant croak of a frog, the quiet slap of water against the hull, the creak of wood that is far too thin in places. The boat is never silent. Even in the stillest moments, it sighs and shifts, as if reminding you that it could let you down at any moment. It is a relationship built on mutual distrust. You lean forward and begin to paddle, fighting the slow drag of the leaking boat. Each stroke is harder than it should be, the boat responding with stubborn reluctance. You have to work twice as hard for half the distance, your arms straining and your breath already short. Every muscle in your body complains, every joint aches. The boat, meanwhile, simply complains louder. Sometimes you catch yourself talking to it, muttering curses or pleading with it to hold together just a little longer. You have cursed its ancestors, its builders, even the trees it was carved from. You have promised it offerings, sworn at it in every language you know, and threatened to let it rot on the shore. It never listens, but it never leaves you either. Together, you drift farther from the bank, away from the safety of land, and into the wide, uncaring arms of the river. As the current picks up, the boat lurches and creaks again. You brace yourself, every sense alert for the telltale signs of disaster: a sudden shift, a crack, or the slow, icy flood of water beneath your feet. But for now, the boat holds together, its misery perfectly matched to your own. You paddle on, your worst friend beneath you, both of you bound together by the same bleak necessity, neither of you able to let go. The boat, in its half rotten, barely floating misery, creaks beneath you as you push farther from the bank and into the broad, slow sweep of the river. Every paddle stroke is a negotiation between your will and the boat's tendency to veer sideways or get stuck on hidden snags. The river itself is not welcoming. It is a highway of misfortune, winding between drowned trees and ancient, half submerged logs, each one waiting to punch a fresh hole in your soul or knock you sprawling into the freezing water. You watch the shoreline slide past, trees standing like crooked sentinels, their roots clawing the mud, their branches half dead, strung with old nests and the wind shredded memories of seasons past. The air is sharp and smells of rot and wet wood. There is a kind of silence that only exists on the river, a silence filled with danger, too complete to be comforting. You know, as every boatman does, that the river is never truly still. Beneath the surface, unseen things are always moving: snags, currents, the occasional corpse of a tree, or something that once wore shoes, swirling in slow, patient circles. It is almost funny, in a way that makes your stomach tighten, how danger here is both constant and invisible. In every direction, the river looks wide, even lazy, a simple thing you could float down with one arm over the side. But you know the traps. The river will kill you quietly, with no drama. A gentle swirl marks a place where the current runs backward, an eddy that will spin your boat until you are dizzy and lost. A dark line on the water shows where submerged branches wait to drag you under or tear open your hull. If you get careless for a second, the river punishes you, quickly but without malice. It is not personal. The river does not care about you at all. Your boat scrapes over something hard, and for a moment your heart stops. You know the feeling, the sound, the sudden tilt, the sick, weightless second before the boat either rights itself or flips over and dumps you into the river's icy embrace. This time you are lucky. The boat shudders, complains, but stays upright. You keep paddling, but your hands tremble a little. You try not to think about the stories. Everyone knows at least a dozen of the men who slipped and were gone in a moment, found days later, white and swollen, their mouths full of mud. You check your supplies automatically: the net, your battered lines, the makeshift spear. None of it gives you comfort. You know that out here, surrounded by water and cold, you are just as vulnerable as you were on land, maybe more. If something happens, if you tip, if your boat takes on too much water, if a hidden snag rips open the bottom, there is no one to save you. No one will hear your shout. Most likely, you would not even bother to shout. The river does not care. The birds, if there are any, will watch without interest. The only company you will have is the wet slap of water and the slow, sucking pull of the current. The first real obstacle comes quickly. A tangle of deadwood sprawls across the river, branches slick with algae, sticking up at odd angles like the fingers of a drowning man. You edge closer, slowing your paddle, eyes scanning for the safest gap. There is never a safe gap, only the one that looks least likely to kill you. You steer, heart in your throat, trying to keep the boat steady as you slip between the branches. The wood scrapes along the sides, clawing at your patches. For a moment, one of the old branches catches on the prow, and you freeze, breath caught in your chest. Then the boat slides free with a sucking sound, and you are past. This time, you do not relax. There is no relaxing on the river. Every stroke of the paddle is a test. You are always one slip away from disaster. The irony of danger is that, over time, it becomes ordinary. You learn to accept it, to row straight through it, because you have no choice. The only alternative is to give up, and you know what happens to those who give up. Sometimes, on misty mornings, you can see the proof, a pale shape tangled in the reeds, an overturned boat half swallowed by the mud. Those shapes are warnings, or maybe they are just reminders. The river does not play favorites. It takes whoever it wants, whenever it wants. The weather, too, is a threat. The sky hangs low and gray, pressing down on you, making the world feel small and mean. Sometimes the sun burns through the mist, dazzling and cold, making your eyes ache. Other days, rain starts suddenly, turning the surface of the river into 1,000 little explosions, soaking you before you can even curse. Your clothes are always damp, your skin always chilled. The wind picks up without warning, cutting through your patched tunic, raising goosebumps on your arms. You shiver, but you keep paddling. The alternative is to stop, and you cannot afford to stop. Time loses meaning on the river. Minutes stretch out, each one a little struggle. You focus on the routine, scan for snags, keep the boat straight, paddle steady, breathe. Your thoughts drift to other things because thinking about danger too much only makes you reckless. You remember stories you heard as a child, stories of boatmen braving wild rivers, laughing in the face of peril. You know those stories are lies. No one laughs out here. If you hear laughter, it is probably the ravens. At last, you come to a wider stretch, the current slowing, the banks receding. Here, the river looks almost beautiful, blue-gray and silver in the weak morning light. For a heartbeat, you almost believe you could be safe, that maybe this time the river will let you pass without incident. But even as you think it, your boat drifts sideways, bumping against a hidden log. Water sloshes in around your feet. You curse, fighting the urge to panic. You know the drill. You grab a handful of moss from your patch bag, shove it into the fresh leak, press hard, and hope. The boat holds, for now. That is the irony of the river and of your life. Every moment of danger is followed by another and another until they all blend together into one long, exhausting struggle. You are never safe, not really. You are only lucky, and luck is the most treacherous friend of all. So you paddle on, muscles aching, breath sharp in your throat, eyes never leaving the water ahead. You keep going because you have to. The river is dangerous, but stopping is worse. Stopping means surrender, and you are not ready to surrender. Not yet. Not while there is still another day to fight, another scrap of luck to chase. The boat groans, the river hisses, and you move forward, deeper into danger, because there is nowhere else to go. There are few moments on the river that you dread quite as much as the act of fishing itself. It is the central reason for your miserable voyage, the only hope you have of returning to your camp with anything to eat. But it is also a ritual of repeated humiliation, a daily game in which you are always the underdog, and the river's creatures rarely lose. You set your leaking boat against a sluggish backwater where fallen branches make a kind of natural pen, and the water is black with shadow. You know this spot well. You have tried it 100 times and failed 100 minus 1. But today is a new day, which only means that yesterday's defeats are still with you, but not the final word. First, you check your net. It is a patchwork horror, made of old lines, bits of twine, strips of hide, and knots so lumpy they could double as clubs. You inspect it for new holes, not because you hope it is intact, but because you need to know where the worst betrayals will come from. It smells like old fish and new rot, like most things you own. You toss it into the water, letting it sink beneath the surface, where it will either trap something edible or simply become a snack for the river's sharp toothed residents. While the net drifts, you try your line. The hook is a dull, battered piece of bone tied with 3 different kinds of string. You bait it with a scrap of last week's luck, something gray and unidentifiable that you found in the bottom of your pouch. Maybe it was meat once. Now, it is just a hope given form. You lower the line into the dark water, every muscle tense with anticipation and dread. Time passes differently here. Every second stretches until your mind begins to wander, but you dare not lose focus. You must watch the line for the smallest twitch, the barest sign that something living is interested in your offering. Mostly, there is nothing. The line hangs limp. The river ignores you. Your stomach rumbles, reminding you of what is at stake. Occasionally, something tugs. Sometimes it is only a piece of debris, a drifting branch, or a clump of weed. Sometimes it is a fish, quick and clever, stealing the bait without even a ripple. You curse, reel in, and rebait again and again. The water is so cold that your fingers begin to ache and go numb, making every movement slow, clumsy, painful. The cold climbs your arms, seeps into your chest. You are shivering, but you barely notice. Misery is a constant companion, and cold is only one of its faces. The net is no better. You pull it in at intervals, always hoping, always dreading. Some days you catch nothing but mud and empty shells, or a tangle of river weeds so thick you have to cut it loose. On luckier days, The net holds a few finger sized fish, eyes glassy, bodies thin. Sometimes the catch is so meager that you have to decide whether to eat it yourself or bring it back to your children, whose bones are already too close to the surface. This is the kind of choice that makes you want to stop feeling anything at all. There are other dangers too. The river is full of secrets, and not all of them are fish. More than once, you have hauled in your net to find it full of writhing eels, their bodies cold and slick, mouths opening and closing on nothing. Sometimes you catch a snapping turtle, which hisses and thrashes and can snap a finger in half. Sometimes there are things with too many legs, or too few, and you drop the net in disgust, hoping none of them crawl into your clothing. Each time, you tell yourself you are getting better at this, but you know it is a lie. The river always finds a new way to humiliate you. Your hands are bleeding from the cold, the string cutting into your skin. Your arms ache from rowing and from pulling the net again and again with nothing to show for it. Sometimes you wonder what would happen if you just let the line go, let the net drift away. Would the river even notice? Would you? But the thought passes. You cannot afford to lose your tools. They are the difference between hunger and starvation, and between starvation and something even worse. You look down into the water, trying to see what waits below the surface. Sometimes you glimpse movement, shadows flickering, scales flashing. Sometimes you see nothing but your own reflection, hollow eyed, gaunt, skin stretched tight over bone. The river does not care about your hunger, your hope, or your desperation. It only reflects it back to you, distorted and cold. There is a moment every day when you almost give up. Today, it comes as you haul the net for the fifth time and find it empty yet again. You stare at your trembling hands, at the sores on your fingers, at the half rotten boat beneath you, and wonder why you bother. The answer, as always, is that there is no other choice. If you do not fight for each miserable fish, each meager scrap, no one will do it for you. Hunger is not a story that ends. It is only paused between one failed attempt and the next. Finally, after what feels like hours, you pull in the line and feel something different. The tug is sharp, insistent, a real catch. You haul it up, breath held, hands fumbling. It is a fish, small and sickly, scales flaking but alive. You clutch it like treasure, even though you know it is barely enough for a single mouth. You put it with the rest, if there are any, in a little basket that stinks of old catches and failed hopes. You keep fishing because stopping is not allowed. You fish until your arms ache, until your fingers bleed, until the cold in your bones feels permanent. The agony is routine, the disappointment expected. The hope, as always, is the cruelest part because every once in a while the river lets you win. Not enough to change your fate, but enough to keep you coming back. As you finally reel in your line for the last time, you glance around at the water, the banks, the gray sky. You have survived another round of this game, but the river's patience is infinite, and yours is not. You look at your paltry catch and wonder how many more days you can do this before there is nothing left inside you but the cold. You push the paddle back into the water and let the current drag you downstream. You are already tired, already beaten, but tomorrow you will be here again, repeating the agony, because the river never lets you forget. Hunger is forever, and the fight to satisfy it is never won. The river, with all its slow moving menace, does not care that you have caught nothing but a few sickly fish and an ache in every joint. Now that your arms are numb and your shoulders throb, the water itself becomes your most immediate enemy, a presence so constant, so inescapable, that it is easier to ignore its dangers than to face them. That, of course, is how it wins. Your hands have been in the river for hours. The skin is raw, the knuckles split and red. Every small wound, every cut and scrape from the fishing lines and the net is a welcome mat for rot and sickness. Sometimes you wonder if your fingers have always looked like this, bloated and pale, the nails rimmed with dirt, the tips hardened and dead to feeling. When you rub them together, it feels like someone else's hands, or like the hands of a corpse. Your feet are no better. Water seeps into the bottom of your miserable boat with every movement, and there is never any hope of staying dry. The soles of your feet are thick and cracked, but even the toughest skin cannot hold back the river forever. Cold soaks through your bones. It pools in your joints and settles in your back. It becomes part of you. On the worst days, you imagine that your very blood is thinning, turning to cold river water that sluggishly flows from your heart. You are always wet, not just from the rain or the spray, but from the constant, oozing dampness that rises from the planks of your boat, from your clothes, from the world itself. In the early days, you tried to fight it, to keep your gear dry, to find a patch of sunlight or shelter. You would wring out your tunic, peel off your shoes, and lay everything out in the hope that it might dry. That hope died quickly. Now you simply accept the water as part of your existence, just as you accept hunger and cold and pain. To struggle against it would be to waste the last of your strength. The worst, though, is what the water does to your body over time. You remember stories told around the fire, old boatmen with their legs rotted away, who dragged themselves through the mud on their elbows. You always thought they were exaggerated, meant to scare children, or maybe just a way for the old to explain why they moved so slow. But now you see it for yourself. The sores that never heal, the infections that eat away at flesh, the smell of rot that clings to your feet and never quite fades, no matter how much you scrub. At night, your limbs ache with a deep, cold pain. It is not just tiredness, but something older and meaner, a creeping misery that settles into the marrow. You wrap yourself in whatever furs you have, but the cold is inside you now, deeper than fur can reach. Some mornings, you wake up shivering so hard that your teeth chatter, even when the fire is burning. Other mornings, you wake up with nothing but a dull, numb ache, a warning that someday soon you may not wake up at all. You think sometimes of drinking the river's water, letting it slake your thirst. The taste is bitter, full of silt and the memory of things long dead. If you drink too much, you become sick, fevered, sweating, racked with cramps. You have learned to boil the water first, but sometimes you are too tired or too desperate and you drink it anyway, hoping that this time it will not kill you. The river always wins in the end. You see the proof in your neighbors, in the old men who cough blood, in the children who never grow tall, in the bodies that float downstream with blank, peaceful faces. The boat, always leaking, forces you to bail constantly. You scoop up handfuls of the icy water, toss them overboard, only for more to seep in, endless and relentless. There are days when you wonder if you are bailing the river, or if the river is simply bailing you, washing away your strength, your hope, your life, one scoop at a time. Sometimes, in your darkest moods, you imagine simply sitting still, letting the water rise and fill the boat until it covers you completely. You wonder if the river would even notice another lost boatman. You do not talk about these things with the others. There is nothing to say. Everyone knows what the water does. You see it in the way people walk, slowly, stiffly, favoring one leg, one arm, a hand wrapped in dirty cloth. You see it in the eyes of the children, already learning not to cry when the cold bites or the sores open. The river has taught you all the same lessons. It does not hate you. It does not care enough to hate anything. It is simply there, cold and eternal, patient and hungry. You learn to move carefully, to avoid getting wetter than you have to patch your boat as best you can. But you know it is a losing battle. The water will always find a way in, and you will always end the day colder and sicker than you began. You wonder how much of you is still human and how much is simply river wearing your skin like an old waterlogged cloak. The water, your constant enemy, will kill you slowly, and you will fight it until you have no fight left. You will curse it, and you will fear it, but in the end, you will accept it. You have no choice. The river is everywhere, and you are its guest, its victim, and, if you are lucky, its survivor for one more miserable day. You keep bailing, keep rowing, keep fishing. You ignore the aches, the sores, the creeping numbness that climbs up your legs. The water is cold, but it is also alive, and it will not let you forget it. Every drop is a reminder that this life is not meant to be pleasant or easy. Every shiver is proof that you are still alive, still fighting, still here, if only just. By now, the fish you have managed to catch, one, maybe two, if fortune looked your way for a single heartbeat, lie in the bottom of your boat, slick and pathetic, eyes already clouding. If you are lucky, there is enough meat here to stretch across two mouths, perhaps three, if you ration with the discipline of a stone saint. But luck is fickle, and the river always gives less than it takes. As you glance at your catch, a strange truth gnaws at the corners of your thoughts. Food, out here, is less a blessing than it is a curse. The river's fish are thin, stringy things, often sick with parasites or marked by strange lesions. Their bellies are soft and distended. Their eyes do not glisten with the clean clarity of healthy creatures. Instead, they look back at you, flat and unblinking, as if judging you for your desperation. You gut them automatically, hands stiff with cold, using a knife you have sharpened so many times it is little more than a sliver of iron. Sometimes, as you cut into the soft flesh, you find worms wriggling inside, white and lively as any fish, tangled around the bones and innards. There is no satisfaction in the work, only disgust and a sense of being mocked by the universe. You do not throw these fish away, you cannot afford to. You pick out the worst of the worms with fingers that tremble, flinging them back into the river, where you know they will simply swim off and find another host. You try not to think about the ones you miss, the ones that remain, coiled somewhere in the meat. You tell yourself that boiling will kill them. You tell yourself that hunger is deadlier than any worm. You tell yourself a lot of things, none of them comforting. You have tried other sources of food when the fish refuse to bite. Some days you collect snails from the muddy shallows, prying them off rocks with the tip of your knife. Some days you scrape up riverweed and pretend it is soup. Once in the spring, you found a dead animal tangled in the reeds, a deer, half eaten, its eyes already picked out by birds. You considered it for a long time, weighing the sickness that might come against the certainty of hunger. In the end, you took only the skin, and the memory of that decision has haunted your dreams ever since. You know all the edible plants that grow near the water's edge. You know which roots can be dug and which berries will not kill you outright. But even these are not true relief. The roots are tough, stringy, bitter as regret. The berries are few, and birds get most of them before you do. There are days when you catch yourself eyeing things you never would have considered as a child: beetles, grubs, the half dried remains of a frog left by a passing heron. Your tongue recoils at the thought, but your stomach protests, loud and insistent. When you finally eat, it is with little pleasure. Hunger has long since consumed any joy in food. Instead, you eat as quickly as you can, swallowing before your mind has time to consider what exactly you are putting into your mouth. You chew mechanically, eyes on the water, trying not to taste the bitterness or feel the grit of river sand between your teeth. Each bite is a reminder of how far you have fallen, how narrow the line is between survival and surrender. Sometimes, after eating, you are rewarded with a bout of nausea or a fever that comes in the night, twisting your gut and making your vision swim. You know others who have not survived such gifts, neighbors who went to bed hungry and never woke, or who woke only to be racked with sickness until they faded away, pale and hollow eyed. There are stories of spirits in the fish, of curses placed by ancient enemies, of the river itself taking vengeance for something your people did long ago. You do not believe these stories, but sometimes, when the pain in your stomach is sharp and hot, you wonder if they are not at least a little true. Food is a curse because it is never enough. Even on the rare days when you manage a larger catch, or when the wild onions and cattail roots are thick, there are always too many mouths and too little to fill them. You think of your family waiting back at camp, the hunger in their faces, the hollow way they look at you when you return empty handed. It is not disappointment you see there, or even anger. It is a resigned, bottomless hunger, the sort that settles into your bones and never truly leaves. You share what you have, always dividing, always holding back just enough to make the next day possible. There is no feasting, not really. The closest you come is gnawing on a boiled fish, spitting out bones and praying you do not bite down on a worm. You tell stories, not because you want to, but because silence makes the hunger worse. Sometimes you imagine what a feast would be like, a real feast, with meat and bread and laughter that does not sound forced. But these dreams make waking harder, and so you push them away, focusing instead on the immediate, brutal necessity of staying alive. The curse of food is that you cannot live without it, but you cannot live with it either, not as it comes to you now, tainted by parasites, by fear, by the knowledge that every bite is only postponing another day of the same struggle. You eat because you must, and when the last mouthful is gone, you are left hungrier than before, haunted by the taste of something that was never meant to satisfy. The river gives, but it gives grudgingly, always with a price. You finish your meal, if it can be called that, wiping your mouth with the back of your hand, eyes already searching for the next thing you will have to eat, the next source of disappointment. Hunger is never far behind. It waits, patient and cruel, knowing that the river's gifts are never given freely. Food, in this world, is a curse you can never escape. And so, with the taste of bitterness still on your tongue, you go back to the routine of bailing water, patching holes, watching the sky for signs of weather, and waiting for the next pang of hunger to drive you back to the river's edge. The curse continues, as it always has, as it always will, until the river or the hunger, or both, finally win. Fatigue is a word that does not begin to describe what lives inside your body. By midday, after hours of rowing, bailing, fighting the current, and snatching at scraps of food, your muscles have long since burned through whatever reserves they possessed. The ache that settles into your arms, your back, your legs, is not the kind that vanishes with a night's sleep, because you do not get that kind of sleep, and your days are never kind. Every movement is a negotiation with pain. You can no longer recall what it was like to move without soreness, to stretch your limbs and feel nothing but strength. Now, every stroke of the paddle is answered by a sharp protest from your shoulders. Every attempt to haul in the net or the line makes your hands cramp and your wrists twinge. Sometimes, if you look at your hands in the gray light, you can see how thin and roped they have become, tendons standing out, fingers swollen at the joints, nails cracked and rimmed with black. You do not remember a time when your back did not hurt. If you sit too long, the pain grows sharp and stabbing. If you stand, your legs tremble from exhaustion, threatening to buckle. The days blur together, each one erasing the memory of rest and replacing it with a deeper, duller ache. The river seems to sense your weakness. On days like this, it offers more resistance, more biting wind, more obstacles to steer around, as though daring you to collapse. Still, you keep moving. You do not have the luxury of stopping, not even for a moment. If you let yourself pause, even just to close your eyes or catch your breath, you know you might never start again. The body is traitorous. Given an inch, it will take a mile, and you cannot afford a mile. There is always another fish to chase, another branch to dodge, another leak to patch. Stopping is a small death, and you already carry too many deaths with you. The hunger that gnaws inside you does not help. Your belly is never full, never satisfied, and the little you do eat only seems to sharpen the ache. Hunger saps your strength, slows your reflexes, turns your arms to lead. You tell yourself you must keep going for the sake of your family, for the hope that tomorrow will be different. But even that hope is thin and worn, like the seat of your old patched leggings. Sometimes you dream of simply letting go, letting the river take you wherever it wants, letting the current carry you downstream, away from struggle and into the oblivion of exhaustion. Even your mind is tired. Thoughts come slow and thick, each one sticking in the sludge of fatigue. You forget simple things, where you put the gourd you used to bail, whether you checked the net already, whether you spoke to someone that morning or merely imagined it. The river is a world without clocks, but you measure time by the heaviness in your limbs, the number of times you catch yourself staring at nothing, eyes unfocused, mouth open. The boat does not care about your fatigue. If anything, it seems to conspire against you, demanding constant attention. There is always another leak to plug, another seam to retie, another layer of slime to scrape away with the edge of your knife. You keep at it because the alternative is to let the boat fill with water and capsize. The thought of struggling in the river's cold grip, your limbs too tired to swim, is enough to keep you working, barely. Worse than the fatigue is the knowledge that it is permanent. You have seen the older men, the boatmen, who have survived decades of this life. Their bodies are twisted, their hands deformed, their gaits awkward and slow. They shuffle along the riverbank, bent double, eyes dull with pain and defeat. You know, without being told, that you are seeing your future. No one escapes the river's toll. The strong become weak, the quick become slow, and the ones who refuse to slow down simply disappear. The nights bring no relief. When you finally drag yourself back to your camp, to your lean-to that stinks of smoke and wet fur, you collapse into a heap, unable to even remove your damp clothing. Sleep comes quickly, but never deeply. You wake a dozen times, cold, hungry, or seized by cramps in your legs. The wind howls outside, or rain beats on the roof, and you lie there, listening to the sounds, counting the beats of your heart, wondering if it will ever stop. You have forgotten what true rest feels like. Even on the rare nights when you sleep without interruption, you wake up feeling worse than before, as though your body has grown heavier, your bones denser with fatigue. The dreams you have of warmth, of food, of laughter only serve to make waking more miserable, a reminder of what you no longer have. Fatigue becomes a kind of background music, always playing, always dragging at the edges of your life. It dulls your senses, makes the colors of the world flatter, the sounds more distant. Even the river, with all its dangers and shifting moods, seems less real through the haze of exhaustion. You move like a ghost, unseen and unseeing, trapped in a body that is little more than a vessel for pain and hunger. And yet, you keep going, not because you are brave or stubborn or full of hope, but because there is simply no other choice. The river demands everything, and you give what you have, and when that runs out, you give more. Every morning, you rise to find the fatigue still waiting for you, heavier than before, and every night you lay it down like a burden you know you must pick up again at dawn. The river knows no pity, and neither does life. Your fatigue is your companion, your reminder that you are still alive, still fighting, still losing, one day at a time, one stroke at a time, until even the act of moving is an act of defiance against the weight of your own body. And so you move and ache and move again, because there is nothing else to do and no one to do it for you. You are not alone on the river, at least not in the sense that other souls are out here too, paddling their half rotten boats, scraping for the same meager fish, fighting the same relentless current. Sometimes, through the morning mist, or the thin gray light of an overcast noon, you see the silhouette of another boatman, a hunched figure, back bent, eyes low, moving with the same defeated rhythm as you. It is a comfort in the same way that a bruise is a comfort, proof that you are not the only one suffering. On rare occasions, your boats drift close enough to exchange more than a glance. There is no cheer in these meetings, no joy in shared misery. Instead, it is a celebration of despair, a communion of the hopeless, where the only thing given freely is a small, bitter laugh at your own expense. You recognize most of these men by the way they move, a hesitancy in their shoulders, a limp in their step, the constant, unconscious gesture of wiping snot from their nose or scratching at the lice beneath their tunic. Some you have known since childhood, others are faces that come and go, changing as quickly as the river itself. Conversations, if they can be called that, are sparse and practical. You never ask, "How are you?" That question would be too cruel, its answer too obvious. Instead, you trade news. Anything biting upstream? See any sign of the heron? Did you hear about the storm last night? The words are heavy, falling between you and the other like stones dropped in water. There is no warmth in these exchanges, only a sense of shared resignation, as though you are all characters in the same grim joke, waiting for the punchline. Sometimes one of you will hold up a catch, a skinny fish, a turtle, a few miserable clams, and the other will grunt in approval or shake his head in mock sorrow. It is not envy you feel, but a kind of grim camaraderie, the understanding that any fortune is temporary and any catch could be your own next time. Once, a man you barely knew offered you a chunk of his haul, and you refused, not out of pride, but out of superstition. You have learned that accepting another man's luck often brings twice as much misfortune. He understood. He never offered again. There are unspoken rules to these encounters. You do not come too close to another man's boat unless invited. You do not ask about his family or his health or his plans for the winter. You do not look too long at his catch, and you never, ever ask to borrow a net or a line. The river has taught you that sharing is not always kindness, and kindness is rarely free. The best you can hope for is a nod, a half smile, and the knowledge that you have both survived another morning. But there are times, more often than you would like, when these meetings are less friendly. Hunger, like the river, breeds suspicion and anger. If you drift too close to another man's lines, you might find yourself the subject of curses, shouted threats, even a thrown rock if he is particularly desperate. You cannot blame him. You have felt the same hot anger, the same urge to defend your miserable patch of river from anyone who looks even a little less hungry than you. Out here, every scrap is precious, and every stranger is a potential thief. Occasionally, you encounter someone new, a face you do not recognize, in a boat you have never seen. These are the most dangerous meetings. You exchange wary glances, each sizing the other up, hands never far from your paddle or the knife tucked into your belt. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes there are words, questions, warnings, veiled threats. Sometimes there is violence. You have heard stories of men who disappeared after such encounters, their boats found drifting empty, their bodies never recovered. The river keeps its secrets, and you do not ask too many questions. Yet, for all the danger, there are moments of almost accidental humanity. On the coldest mornings, when frost clings to your eyebrows and your breath clouds in the air, someone might toss you a lump of hard bread or a half-dried strip of meat. You mumble thanks, knowing you will repay the favor if the river ever decides to pity you. There are nights when, sheltering from a storm beneath the same cluster of trees, you share a fire and a silence so heavy it almost feels like company. Still, the overwhelming feeling is not fellowship, but isolation. The river is wide and your lives are narrow. Each man rows his own leaking boat, fights his own losing battle. The only thing you truly share is the knowledge that none of you will ever win. Misery loves company, they say, but out here, company is just another reminder of how little comfort there is in shared suffering. You paddle away from these meetings with a mixture of relief and regret. Relief that you have not lost anything more than a few words. Regret that you have not gained anything at all. The river closes around you again, The silence is settling in, broken only by the creak of your boat and the distant call of a crow. You think of the others out there, scattered along the water's winding path, each one as lonely and tired as you, and wonder how many will make it to tomorrow. Some will not. The river will take them, or the cold, or the hunger. The rest will wake, as you do, to another day of fighting for scraps and sharing nothing but the certainty of despair. That is the real celebration out here, not of life, but of endurance, not of hope, but of the simple, stubborn refusal to disappear. Each encounter is a brief pause in the routine of struggle, a reminder that you are not special, not alone, not even unique. You are just another boatman, clinging to the margins of survival, floating through a world that rewards you only with the knowledge that, for now, you are still here. You glance back over your shoulder, half expecting to see another shape in the mist, another soul rowing toward oblivion. But the river has swallowed them, as it will someday swallow you, and all that remains is the endless, echoing silence, a silence filled with the memory of voices and the certainty that you will soon be alone again. If the river is an enemy, then the weather is its cruel, capricious master, a force that mocks your efforts at every turn, a god you do not worship but must appease. The sun, the rain, the wind, the cold, they are all part of the same endless punishment, and you have learned that the only constant in your world is the misery the weather brings. You wake up some mornings to a sun so weak it seems an afterthought, a pale smudge struggling to push its way through a sky made of dirty wool. You might think, for a moment, that this is mercy, a gentle dawn, a light breeze, a day when nothing tries to kill you. But you have lived too long on this river to be fooled by kindness. The sun can turn on you in a heartbeat, burning your face, raising blisters on your neck, making the air shimmer with heat until every breath tastes of dust and defeat. Your skin peels, your lips crack, and the sweat that pours from you only makes the river's cold more treacherous when you return to it. More often, the weather chooses to be cruel. Rain is your constant companion, never a warm, forgiving rain, but the kind that soaks you through in moments, finds its way under your clothes, into your boots, into the very marrow of your bones. There are days when it starts in the morning and does not stop until well after nightfall, drumming on your little shelter until the roof leaks and the ground beneath you turns to black mud. The river swells and grows cloudy, carrying debris and dead things, making every trip out a gamble against drowning. The wind is worse in its way. Sometimes it rises without warning, a sudden blast that turns the surface of the river to froth and sends your boat spinning like a toy. You have seen what happens to those who underestimate the wind. A man blown out of his seat, his boat dashed against a half-sunken tree, the cold water closing over his head before he can even shout for help. The wind carries away your words, your heat, your hope. It never stops, only shifts direction, like a bored cat deciding which mouse to torture next. But it is the cold that is most faithful, the true monarch of suffering. The cold is everywhere, always waiting, always ready to seep into your flesh and hollow you out from within. You feel it in the mornings, in the ache of your knees, in the numbness of your fingers, in the way your breath hangs heavy in the air. Even when you think you have prepared, bundled in furs, wrapped in layers of whatever scraps you can find, the cold finds a way in. It settles between your ribs, at the base of your spine, at the joints where your body is weakest. You can light a fire, and for a few moments you might imagine you are winning. But the cold will wait. The cold is patient. There are moments when the weather becomes something close to personal. You curse the sky, the clouds, the wind, as if they can hear you. Sometimes you plead, sometimes you bargain, but you know it is pointless. The weather has no memory, no reason, no justice. It does not punish you because you have sinned, and it does not reward you because you have tried. It simply is. Some days, you suspect it is not even aware of you at all. There are old stories told by those who lived before you about how the weather once followed patterns, how the seasons could be trusted, how a wise man could look at the sky and know what to expect. Maybe those stories were true once, or maybe they are just another kind of wishful thinking. Out here, the only pattern you see is that things will get worse before they get better, and then worse again. The river might freeze in winter, but not enough to trust it. A thaw comes suddenly, turning solid ground to treacherous slush, collapsing the roofs of shelters, flooding the food stores, sending whole families downstream. Storms are the worst, and you know their signs. The sudden hush, the taste of electricity on the air, the way the animals vanish, and even the river seems to hold its breath. You lash down your boat, tie your meager possessions to the highest branch you can find, and wait for the onslaught. Rain falls in sheets, driven sideways by the wind. Trees snap, lightning cracks overhead, and somewhere not far away, you hear the river claiming another piece of land, another unlucky soul. When it is over, you crawl out of your shelter and count the losses: a missing paddle, a ruined net, food stores washed away or spoiled by water. The storm never takes only what you can spare. The weather makes enemies of your friends. On hot days, tempers flare, words are spoken that cannot be taken back. On cold nights, you huddle together for warmth, each person resentful of the other's shivering. Children cry more, old people stop talking, and the dogs disappear, going feral, returning only when the worst is over or when hunger drives them back to your fires. The weather divides as much as it unites. Your own body becomes a battleground. You learn to read the warning signs. The strange color of your skin after too long in the wind, the numbness that spreads from your toes upward, the ache in your lungs from breathing air so cold it feels like knives. You make choices: when to risk the river, when to risk the shore, when to risk staying put and facing whatever storm is coming. Sometimes you choose right, often you do not. The supreme cruelty of the weather is that it never lets you rest. Just when you think you have adapted, it changes. Just when you think you have survived, It turns meaner, pettier, more inventive in its torments. You wonder sometimes if you have done something to deserve this. You wonder what it would be like to live in a place where the weather was an ally, not a tyrant, a place where you could plan, where you could hope, where the sky was not a threat. But hope, like sunlight, is a rare and fleeting thing. Mostly, you learn to endure. You keep moving, keep patching your boat, keep searching for firewood, keep praying for a day that is merely bad instead of catastrophic. You know the truth. The weather is not here to kill you, at least not directly. It is here to make you suffer, to stretch out your misery, to remind you every single day how small and powerless you really are. So you huddle against the wind, squint at the sun, curse the rain, and try not to let the cold steal the last shreds of feeling from your heart. This is your life. The weather is your overlord, your torturer, your constant companion, and you, stubborn and broken, are still here, suffering, enduring, cursing the sky, waiting for the next punishment to begin. The river gives and the river takes, but mostly it takes. Sometimes, as you drift along the banks or paddle through the shallows, you see the evidence of this unbalanced trade, the silent witnesses, reminders of the fate that waits for every boatman, no matter how skilled, no matter how careful. The dead are always close, always part of the landscape, woven into the everyday pattern of river life in a way that is both shocking and, somehow, completely expected. You see it first in little things: a boot tangled in the reeds, a hat drifting along the current, a paddle floating, half submerged, bobbing up and down like a lost memory. These are not just lost objects. You know better than to believe in lost and found. These are remnants, pieces of someone's story interrupted, markers that another boatman has met the river's patience and lost. They wash up against the banks, collecting silt and mud, becoming part of the river's hoard of secrets. Sometimes there is more. Sometimes you see a whole boat, upside down and half filled with water, its hull scraped and battered by the rocks. You know that a boat does not abandon its owner willingly. Something had to tip it, fill it, drag it under. You slow your own miserable craft, eyeing the wreck with something like reverence or fear or the sour mixture of both. You might even drift a little closer, hoping for some scrap: an old net, a decent paddle, a length of rope that the river has not yet claimed. More often, though, you keep your distance. The dead are contagious, their bad luck ready to jump from one hull to another. And then there are the bodies. You do not always see them, not right away. Sometimes the river is kind enough to hide its work beneath the weeds or under a drift of fallen branches. But eventually, the river grows bored of its trophies, and the dead rise. They appear face down in the reeds, or caught on the roots of a tree, or floating just beneath the surface, pale and bloated, arms spread wide as if to embrace the sky. Crows perch nearby, waiting for you to pass, unafraid. The bodies are silent, but their presence is loud. At first, the sight of a dead fisherman made you sick. You remember your first, how young you were, how much you wanted to look away, how much you wanted to believe it was not real. But you grow used to it because you must. The river does not stop for grief. The work does not pause for sorrow. You look, you take note, and you keep paddling. Sometimes, if the body is someone you know, you might stop and drag it to shore, or tie a bit of cloth to a branch as a marker. But more often, you move on because you have to. There are too many dead and too few hours in the day. The elders tell stories about the old ways, rituals of respect, offerings to guide the souls of the drowned to peaceful rest. But these days, there is no time, no energy for such ceremonies. You whisper a quick word to the river if you remember, but you know it is not enough. The river is a greedy god, never sated, and your prayers do not buy you protection. The only thing the dead teach you is that you are not special, and your time will come. Children learn the lesson early. They see the bodies, or what is left of them, and they ask questions with wide, unblinking eyes. You answer the best you can. He was careless, or she went out alone, or the river was angry. The truth is simpler and more cruel. Death here is random, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, but always waiting. The children nod, as if this makes sense, and go back to their games, already practicing the rituals of looking away, of forgetting, of not letting the fear grow too large. Among the adults, there are private games played with the dead. You count how many bodies you see in a season, betting with yourself whether it will be more or fewer than last year. You compare stories: who was found first, who was never found at all, whose boat was left circling, empty, until it finally broke apart and sank. You remember faces, sometimes, or voices, but mostly you remember the way they looked at you on the last morning you saw them alive, tired, hungry, afraid, exactly like you. There are, of course, those who try to use the dead. You have heard stories of men who loot the bodies, stealing whatever can be pried from stiff fingers: a good knife, a length of twine, an amulet worn around a rotting neck. These men are not liked, but they are not shunned either. Sometimes need is greater than disgust, and you have found yourself eyeing a ring, a pair of boots, a decent belt, before turning away. The river makes monsters of everyone in time. At night, when you lie in your shelter, the faces of the dead come back to you. They float behind your eyelids, silent, accusing, or maybe just bored. You wonder if they envy you with your hunger and your cold and your endless fatigue, or if they pity you for being left behind. Some nights you hope you do not wake to see the morning, that you will join the silent witnesses, float gently downstream, let the river carry you to whatever peace it allows. Most nights, though, you fear the river's embrace, fear the silence, fear becoming just another marker on the bank. You tell yourself that you are different, that you are careful, that you watch the current, that you know the river's tricks. But the dead were careful too, once. They watched the current, They patched their boats, they paddled and fished and struggled just like you. Now they are silent, and you are still moving, still afraid, still clinging to the little life the river has not yet claimed. You push your boat past another patch of reeds, another log jam, another reminder of what the river can do. You do not look too closely. You do not ask too many questions. The dead are everywhere, always watching, always waiting. They are the river's memory, and one day you will join them, silent, floating, a witness to the misery that never ends. Until then, you row on, haunted and grateful, and pretend you do not see. Every boatman knows the visible dangers, sharp rocks, sunken logs, the sudden hunger of the river. But what truly marks you, changes you, and in the end defeats you are the things you cannot see, the parasites and the diseases that drift through the water and the air, that burrow under your skin, that take up residence in your guts and bones and never let you forget them. They are the silent chorus to your miserable days, an ever growing collection of invisible companions that turn survival into a slow war of attrition. It starts small, as most curses do. Maybe your skin begins to itch in a place you cannot reach, a crawling, burning sensation that wakes you at night. Maybe it is just a single patch at first, but soon there are others, red, angry welts, little bumps filled with clear fluid, sores that ooze when you scratch them. You know you should leave them alone, but the urge is overwhelming. You scratch and scratch until your skin bleeds, and then you wrap the wound in dirty cloth and tell yourself it will heal. It does not. The river is not a place for healing. You are always being bitten. The mosquitoes come first, their bites swelling into lumps that never seem to fade. Then come the fleas, the lice, the gnats, and other things without names, each one eager to take a piece of you, each one leaving behind more itching, more swelling, more irritation. At night, you feel them crawling through your hair, between your toes, across your belly and back. You wake to bloodstains on your bedding, to scabs that break open in your sleep, to a dull ache that settles in your joints. Some mornings you are so covered in bites and scratches you hardly recognize your own skin. But the real horror is inside. It is the churning in your stomach, the cramps that double you over, the sudden rush to squat behind a bush because you cannot hold anything down. Your guts are a battleground, the scene of daily misery. You can tell 100 stories about who got sick from what. Fish that looked fine on the outside, but were riddled with worms. Water that seemed clear, but carried the memory of a drowned animal, a single mouthful of soup that made your whole family weak for a week. The river's parasites are patient and clever. They wait for you to be desperate, and then they strike. You have learned to recognize the signs. The pale, sunken eyes, the trembling hands, the skin that sags and wrinkles before its time, the way your nails become brittle, flaking off in dirty crescents, the odd color of your tongue, the sour taste in your mouth that never quite goes away. Sometimes your belly swells, hard and painful, even as the rest of you grows thin. You see it in your neighbors too. Children who cannot keep food down, elders who cough until they spit blood, women who lose child after child and blame it on the cold or the spirits because the truth is too awful to name. There are other things, stranger things, that move through the camp like whispers. Skin that turns yellow, eyes that cloud over, fevers that burn hot enough to melt reason, leaving a body shaking and weak. Some people recover, but most do not. The lucky ones die quickly. The rest fade over weeks, losing strength, losing hope, losing the will to keep fighting. You visit them out of duty, bringing a little water, a few bitter herbs, a wordless prayer. You see the marks on their bodies, the boils, the blackened sores, the foul smelling wounds that never close. The smell of sickness is everywhere, so familiar it no longer registers as a warning. You try to be careful, but there is only so much you can do. You boil your water most of the time, but sometimes the firewood is too wet or the hunger too sharp, and you risk a drink straight from the river, hoping the cold will kill whatever lives inside. You cook your fish, but never long enough, never hot enough. Sometimes you chew a mouthful raw just to feel something in your stomach. You wash your hands when you remember, but the water is never clean, not really. You have become resigned to the fact that you are never truly free of the things that live on and inside you. They are part of you now, as much as the calluses on your hands or the scars on your shins. There are remedies, of course, old wives' tales, charms, bitter roots chewed until your tongue goes numb. Sometimes they work, or seem to, but more often they are just another way to pass the time, another story to tell when the river is quiet and the hunger is less. The elders say that once there were healers who knew how to drive out the sickness, how to treat the sores and the fevers. But if those secrets ever existed, they are long gone, buried under generations of suffering. You learn to live with your invisible companions. You walk a little slower, scratch a little more, spit a little blood, and keep moving. You watch your children and hope they will be stronger, but you know that hope is thin and worn. You look at your own hands, the sores on your arms, the lines on your face, and you know that the river has marked you inside and out. You do not talk about these things. Not really. There is nothing to say. Everyone is sick. Everyone is infested. Everyone is losing. You curse the river. You curse the food. You curse your own bad luck. But you keep rowing, keep fishing, keep hoping for a day when the itching will stop, when your belly will be calm, when your skin will heal. That day never comes. You try to forget the stories of those who lost the battle, men and women who wasted away to nothing, who died scratching at their sores or vomiting into the reeds, who disappeared without a word, leaving only a smell in their shelter and a lesson for the rest. You try, but you cannot. Their ghosts row alongside you, whispering warnings in the dark, reminding you that your true enemies are the ones you cannot see, the ones you cannot fight, the ones that win in the end. And so you row, you itch, you cough, you endure. Parasites and diseases are your constant companions, closer than family, more faithful than friends. They are the true price of life on the river, and one day, when you are too tired to fight, they will claim what is left of you, as they have claimed so many before. Until then, you keep moving, scratching at your sores, hoping for a miracle, knowing you will not get one. You have heard stories about great battles, wars fought with arrows and spears, heroes and villains, clashing armies on fields of honor. But those stories are for the idle, for the old men who never set foot in a leaking boat or slept a night on the riverbank. For you, the true war is not fought with weapons, but with the smallest, most persistent enemies, insects. They do not care for honor, do not know mercy, and unlike hunger or cold, they never sleep. The war begins at dawn, when you crawl out from your thin, stinking blanket and into a cloud of gnats so dense you feel them in your mouth before you taste the morning air. You spit, slap your cheeks, and blink, but they cling to you, drawn to the salt of your skin and the stink of another hungry night. The gnats are relentless, and they swarm thickest in the places you cannot reach, the back of your neck, behind your ears, inside the folds of your tunic. If you sit by the fire, hoping smoke will drive them away, you only succeed in filling your eyes with tears and your lungs with soot. The insects remain unfazed. But gnats are only the vanguard. The true veterans of the war arrive as the day grows warm. Mosquitoes rise from the wet grass, black clouds of them, hungry and cunning. Their buzzing is a constant soundtrack, a high, whining reminder that you are a meal before you are a man. You slap and swat until your arms are streaked with blood, yours and theirs. For every one you kill, 100 more land on your ankles, your wrists, the soft flesh beneath your jaw. Their bites swell into welts that itch and ooze, never healing, always tempting you to scratch until you bleed. Horseflies join the fray by midday, big and clumsy, but with jaws like knives. They circle your head, land in your hair, crawl under your collar. When they bite, it is sharp, immediate, a pain that makes you curse out loud. They are slow enough to kill if you are quick, but killing them is only a small, meaningless victory. There are always more. You have learned to move slowly, to avoid sudden gestures, to accept that you will never be free of their attention, not while there is a drop of blood left in your body. As the sun sets, the biting midges and sandflies come. They are almost invisible, nothing more than a faint tickle on your skin until the itching begins, sharp, deep, impossible to ignore. You feel them crawling through your hair at night, burrowing under the cuffs of your sleeves, hiding in the folds of your blanket. You sleep fitfully, waking to scratch and slap, your dreams filled with crawling things. You wake up tired, more exhausted than when you lay down, your body covered in a fresh constellation of bites. Bed bugs infest your shelter, hiding in the seams of your bedding, in the cracks of the walls, in the lining of your worn furs. You try to drive them out with smoke, with boiling water, with curses and desperate prayers. Nothing works. They return Night after night, each new generation more resilient than the last. Lice make their homes in your hair, laying eggs faster than you can pick them out. Fleas travel from your clothes to your bedding and back again, leaping from host to host, biting and feeding and leaving behind trails of red, irritated skin. Sometimes you find ticks burrowed deep in your armpits, in the creases of your knees, even between your toes. You pick them out with the tip of your knife, careful not to leave the head behind, knowing that if you do, the wound will swell and fester. The old women say the ticks carry sickness, and you believe them. You have seen men grow weak, feverish, delirious after a bite. You have seen children waste away, their skin mottled and their eyes dull, their bodies racked with pain. The war with insects is not just fought on your body, but in your food, your shelter, your very dreams. Ants invade your stores, carrying away whatever crumbs you have managed to save. Spiders take up residence in the corners, spinning webs that catch nothing but dust and despair. Wasps and bees build their nests in the eaves of your lean to, and every so often someone is stung, swelling up like a ripe fruit, gasping for breath. You try remedies, you rub pungent herbs on your skin, smear mud over your arms and legs, sleep wrapped in smoke and wet rags. Sometimes you roll in ashes, hoping the bitter taste will keep the bugs away. You carve little amulets, hang them by your bed, pray to the old gods for mercy. It is all useless. The insects are tireless, immune to your tricks, laughing at your suffering. The children fare no better. Their faces are always streaked with bites, their arms and legs crisscrossed with scratches. They whimper at night, wake crying from dreams of crawling things. You comfort them as best you can, knowing that there is nothing to be done, that this is their inheritance, their education. The old people say the children will get used to it. You do not believe them. No one gets used to this. You tell yourself that you are stronger than a fly, smarter than a flea, braver than a mosquito. But in the deep hours of the night, when you are alone with the sound of wings and the itch that will not let you rest, you know the truth. The insects are winning. They are always winning. They have been here longer than you, and they will be here long after you are gone, feasting on your body, crawling through your bones, making a home of what you leave behind. The endless war with insects is the most honest part of your existence. It is a struggle without hope, without victory, without end. You are not a warrior, just a meal, and the only thing you can do is endure. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, the battle will begin anew. You will scratch and slap and curse, and the insects will feed and breed and laugh at your defiance. This is the true inheritance of the river, a war you can never win, against enemies you can never escape, in a world where even the smallest things take their toll, one bite at a time. After a day spent fighting the river, the insects, the hunger, the cold, you might think that returning home would bring relief, or at least a brief pause in your misery. But the truth is, home is not what it used to be, if it ever was. Now, it is just another battleground, Another place where comfort is a rumor, where shelter is a matter of degrees, and hope is measured in the thickness of smoke and the number of dry spots left on the ground. You arrive at your shelter at dusk, dragging your tired, half frozen body out of the boat and up the muddy path to the place you call home. It is not much to look at, a sagging lean to of sticks and bark, patched with animal hides stiffened by old rain and older blood. The door is a flap of woven reeds, torn at the bottom, where a dog or a hungry child has chewed through looking for scraps. The roof sags under the weight of yesterday's storm, and you can already see the slow drip of water collecting in a puddle beside the sleeping mat. Inside, the air is thick with the smells of wet fur, old smoke, and bodies packed too close together for too many nights. It is the smell of survival, bitter, sour, unwashed, and completely inescapable. There are no windows, of course. The river steals what little light remains, and the flicker of the fire does little but make the shadows dance and the smoke swirl, stinging your eyes and your lungs. You cough, and the sound is echoed by those who share the space with you, family, if the word still means anything, or simply the other survivors assigned by fate and need to the same leaking roof. The floor is mud, always mud, sometimes hard and cracked, sometimes soft and sucking, but never clean, never dry. Every step is a choice between sitting in the wet or huddling in a corner where the wind sneaks in and the bugs gather. The sleeping furs, passed down through more hands than you can remember, are threadbare and crawling with lice. They smell of old sweat, old sickness, old everything. Some nights you cannot decide which is worse, the cold of sleeping without them, or the filth of curling up inside them. You look at the faces around the fire. They are not strangers, not really, but sometimes you wish they were. You see the lines carved by hunger and fear, the grayness in the hair, the hollows in the cheeks, the silence in the eyes. The children cluster close to each other, shivering, their faces and hands streaked with dirt and mosquito bites, their hair tangled into mats. Your partner moves with slow, practiced caution, tending the fire, doling out what little food you have managed to bring home. There is no conversation, no laughter, only the sound of chewing, the crackle of wet wood, the occasional grunt of pain as someone moves in just the wrong way. You try not to look at the food as it is divided, a few skinny fish, maybe a handful of roots or wild onions, a piece of dried meat, so tough it takes half an hour to chew through. Each bite is watched, each scrap counted. You pretend not to notice when someone gets a little more or a little less. You eat in silence, knowing that complaints are pointless and gratitude is just another mask for desperation. After eating, the routine resumes. Someone stokes the fire with whatever half dry wood can be found, coughing as the smoke thickens. Someone else tries to patch a hole in the roof with more reeds, knowing it will not last through the next storm. The children fight over the driest corner, their voices rising, then falling as exhaustion wins out. You pick at your own sores, scratch at the lice, Shake out your sleeping furs and try not to notice the little black dots crawling across your arms. There are no comforts here. The stories told at night are not meant to entertain, but to distract, to fill the space between the howling wind and the scratching of rats in the walls. Sometimes the old people talk of a different time, of homes with real walls and real warmth, of days when food was plentiful and nights were quiet. You have learned not to listen. Nostalgia is just another way for hunger to play tricks on the mind. Sleep is a luxury. You doze in fits, waking every time someone rolls over, or coughs, or starts to shiver uncontrollably. The cold is a living thing, pressing in from every side, sneaking under your furs, settling in your bones. Sometimes you wake with a start, heart pounding, convinced you have heard the river creeping closer, ready to swallow your home whole. Other times you wake to silence so deep it feels like drowning, like the river has finally won and left nothing behind. You do not rest, you endure. In the morning, you will rise and do it all again. Row, fish, bail, patch, scratch, suffer. Home is not a place of safety, not a refuge. It is simply the place where you survive between battles, a space you defend not because it is worth defending, but because it is all you have. You tell yourself that things will get better, that one day you will build a better shelter, find a drier place, a warmer fire, a softer bed. But the river always finds you, the hunger always returns, the cold always slips through the cracks. Home is not a home, it is a holding pen, a waiting room for the next trial, a memory of something you never really had. You cling to it, not out of love, but out of necessity, out of habit, out of fear of what waits outside. You watch the fire burn down, the faces fade into darkness, and you close your eyes, wishing for rest, knowing you will find only another few hours of misery before the river calls you back. This is your home, a patch of mud, a pile of rags, a pocket of warmth you fight for every day, and the only proof you have that you are still alive. Evening comes as it always does, not as a gentle ending, but as a grim curtain pulled over another day of disappointments. The sun sets, or tries to, somewhere behind the endless clouds and the haze of river mist. The light turns gray, then blue, then finally black, smothering the last scraps of warmth. You stare into the darkness, knowing that whatever meager victories you scraped from the river will not be enough. They never are. The little fire at the heart of your shelter struggles against the damp air. The smoke hangs low, clawing at your eyes and throat. You sit huddled around it with your family, if you can call it that. These other people trapped in the same bleak routine. There is no conversation worth the effort. Everyone is tired. Everyone is hungry. Everyone is waiting for something, anything, that will make the night go faster. But nothing does. Dinner is a parody of a meal. There are days when you bring home only a single fish, or maybe two if the river was feeling generous, but it is never enough. The food is divided with all the solemnity of a religious ceremony, but with none of the joy. The youngest children eat first, though even they get little more than a mouthful. The adults eat last, gnawing at bones and scraps, pretending not to notice the hunger gnawing at their insides. Sometimes you skip your own share so the children can eat a little more. Sometimes your partner does the same, each of you pretending not to see the sacrifice. You have long since stopped dreaming of real food. You do not imagine the taste of roasted meat, the sweetness of wild berries, the fullness that comes from eating until you are satisfied. These dreams are dangerous. They only make the hunger worse. Instead, you focus on the act of eating itself, the slow, mechanical process of chewing and swallowing, the way each bite stretches the time until the next wave of hunger crashes over you. You tell yourself that food is just fuel, nothing more. It does not help. After the meal, if it can be called that, the long hours of evening stretch ahead, empty and silent. There is nothing to do but sit by the fire and wait for sleep to come. The children try to play, but their games are half-hearted and quiet. The adults sit with their backs to the wind, watching the flames, watching each other, waiting for the darkness to swallow the last shreds of hope. Sometimes someone tries to tell a story, but even the stories have worn thin. There are only so many ways to explain suffering before the words lose all meaning. You tend to chores because you must, not because you believe they will make a difference. You patch holes in your clothing, knowing the rain will find new ones tomorrow. You check the roof for leaks, knowing the wind will tear it open again the next time it howls down the river. You pick lice from your child's hair, from your own scalp, from the blankets and furs. The insects are winning, as they always do, but the ritual of hunting them is something to do with your hands, a distraction from the ache in your belly and the cold in your bones. The sound of the river is everywhere. Even at night, you cannot escape it. Sometimes it is gentle, a slow, steady gurgle that almost lulls you into thinking the world is not such a bad place. More often, it is a threat, a rumble of water against stones, the slap of waves against the bank, the distant, unmistakable crash of something large falling into the current. You know that every night, someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a stranger, will not wake up. Maybe they slipped onto the mud, or fell asleep too close to the edge, or simply gave up fighting. The river does not care. The river takes what it wants. Inside your shelter, the air is thick with everything you want to forget. The breath of too many bodies, the smell of rot and damp fur, the ceaseless scratching of rats in the walls. The fire burns low, throwing shadows across the faces of your family, making everyone look older, more hollow, more lost. You remember when you used to pray for better days, when you believed that things would change. Now, prayer is just another habit, like bailing the boat or mending the net, something to do because it is expected, not because you expect an answer. Sleep is a distant hope. You lie down on the muddy floor, wrapping yourself in your ragged fur, listening to the sounds of your own hunger. The cold creeps in, always. You try to ignore it, but it is there, settling into your bones, making your joints ache, making your teeth chatter. You close your eyes and hope that sleep will come quickly, that you will drift off before the hunger wakes you again. Some nights you are lucky, most nights you are not. When you do sleep, your dreams are no comfort. You dream of the river, of falling in, of being swept away, of drowning with your mouth full of mud and your lungs full of water. You dream of food that turns to ash in your mash in your mouth, of fires that will not light, of faces you love fading into the darkness. You wake up gasping, heart pounding, unsure for a moment if you are still alive. Then you hear the river, see the fire, feel the cold, and you know that yes, you are alive, if this can be called living. The worst part of the evening is the knowledge that tomorrow will be no different. There is no rescue coming, no change on the horizon. The river will still be there, hungry and cold. The insects will still bite. The food will still be scarce. The roof will still leak, and the cold will still find you. You will rise with the dawn and begin again because there is no other choice. You stare into the darkness, listening to the slow, steady breathing of your family, the crackle of the dying fire, the relentless sound of the river. You tell yourself that you will get through another night, that morning will come, that maybe tomorrow will bring something better. But you do not believe it. Evening is not a time for hope, not here. Here, evening is just the prelude to another round of suffering, another test of endurance, another reminder that you are still alive only because the river has not yet decided otherwise. And so you wait, curled up in your ragged blanket, eyes wide open, heart heavy. You wait for sleep, for morning, for anything that might break the endless cycle of hunger and cold and fear. You wait and you hope, and you know that hope is a lie the night tells to keep you from giving up completely. Here, in the darkness, hope is as thin as the smoke from your fire, as fleeting as warmth, as fragile as the life you cling to, one desperate evening at a time. Community, they say, is what keeps people alive in hard times. But out here on the river, community is not a circle of trust and comfort, but a shifting web of suspicion, envy, and desperation. Your neighbors are not your friends. They are not even your enemies exactly. They are just like you, hungry, tired, clinging to life by their fingernails, and always watching, always calculating whether your fortune means their loss. You know them all, or think you do. You know which family has the best patch of reeds, which man hides a secret stash of dried meat, which woman is rumored to know the best place to set a fish trap. You know who is likely to lend a hand when the wind rips your roof apart, and who will pretend not to hear your shouts for help. You know whose children are the healthiest, whose cough is getting worse, whose face you have not seen in days. But knowledge does not breed kindness, it breeds wariness. Every good day you have is a bad day for someone else. Every fish you catch is a fish your neighbor did not. Every root you dig, every patch you mend, every moment of luck is a mark against you in the silent accounting of river life. You keep your successes quiet, your failures quieter. Boasting is dangerous. It invites envy, and envy is close cousin to theft. Theft is a constant. You check your lines and traps in the gray light of dawn, hoping to find them undisturbed, knowing that sometimes you will not. The first time your net goes missing, you rage, you shout, you demand justice from the elders, from the river, from the world itself. No one listens. Everyone has lost something to a neighbor. Everyone is guilty and aggrieved in equal measure. Soon you stop complaining. You build better hiding places. You check your traps at odd hours. You sleep with one eye open and your knife close at hand. When you do confront a neighbor, it is never direct. Accusations are delivered in sideways glances, in pointed silences, in the careful omission of greetings. If you must speak, your words are as cold as the river. Strange how the fish are biting less this week. Funny how someone's paddle fits my hand so well. No one admits guilt, but everyone understands. There is no forgiveness, only the hope that you will be the thief next time, not the victim. Occasionally, someone is caught in the act. The consequences are never simple. Sometimes the thief is shunned, left to starve at the edge of the camp, denied even the comfort of shared misery. Sometimes there is a fight, quick and brutal, leaving both parties worse off than before. Sometimes a missing child is blamed, or a wandering dog, or the river itself. Blame is a river that flows both ways, muddying every relationship, poisoning every well of trust. But hatred is not the only thread that binds you to your neighbors. There is fear, too, a deeper, more primal fear that unites you against the world outside your miserable circle. When the river rises, when the storms come, when the sickness spreads, you huddle together for warmth and safety. You share the fire, the stories, the scraps of food that would mean nothing alone. You keep watch in shifts, each person scanning the darkness for signs of trouble, knowing that a stranger could be worse than any thief among you. This unity is temporary, brittle, as fragile as hope. As soon as the danger passes, you return to your old habits, counting your stores, eyeing your neighbor's catch, listening for the sound of footsteps near your shelter in the dead of night. You teach your children to be polite but distant, to share when watched, but to hide the best pieces for themselves. You do not encourage friendships. You do not trust kindness that is not desperate. There are, of course, moments of true help, rare as a fat fish in a dry summer. A neighbor brings you a bundle of dry wood after a storm. No words exchanged. You tend a sick child when his mother is too weak to get up, and she thanks you with a silent nod, never mentioning it again. Sometimes you share a joke, a memory, a curse at the river's expense. These moments are small, private rebellions against the bleakness of your world, but they never last. Need always outweighs generosity. Fear always returns. Old grudges last longer than good deeds. You remember the time your net was stolen, the time your best catch vanished overnight, the time you saw your neighbor's footprints by your traps and said nothing. You remember, and you keep score, even as you know that the river keeps its own score, a longer, crueler one, written in bodies and bones. Trust is a luxury you cannot afford. You trade what you must, but always with suspicion. You barter fish for roots, roots for furs, furs for the promise of help that may never come. Every trade is weighed, every word measured, every gesture watched for hidden meaning. There are no secrets on the river, only stories told behind hands, only eyes watching from the shadows. At night, as you lie in your cold, damp shelter, you listen to the sounds of your neighbors moving in the dark. A cough, a whisper, the scrape of a knife on wood. You wonder what they are thinking, if they are planning to take from you, or if they are just as afraid. You wonder if they hate you as much as you sometimes hate them. You wonder if, when the river finally takes you, anyone will notice or care. And yet, you need them. You need their help when the boat springs a leak too large for one person to patch, when a child is born too early, when the old stories must be told again to keep the darkness at bay. You hate them for their needs as much as for your own. This is the real balance of the river: fear and mutual hatred, dependence and resentment, survival at the cost of peace. Out here, relationships are as muddy and dangerous as the river itself. You cling to each other, not out of love, but because there is nowhere else to go, no one else to trust, no other way to survive. In the end, you are all the same: boatmen, thieves, liars, and survivors, bound together by fear and necessity, rowing side by side through the endless misery, hoping that tonight, at least, the only thing stolen is a little more time. They say memory is a comfort, a warm fire in the heart against the coldness of the world. Whoever they are, they clearly never spent their life chasing scraps on a hostile river, never learned the bitterness of recalling better days while staring down another empty evening, another cold morning. Here, memories are not relief, they are a taunt. They drift in like the fog, uninvited, impossible to ignore, making the misery of the present even sharper, the struggle even more pointless. You do not want to remember, but you cannot help it. It happens in those rare, dangerous moments when your mind is not occupied with survival, when you pause at the water's edge, when your paddle dips without rhythm, when you wake too early and the world is still. The memories come, slow and persistent as the hunger in your gut. You remember stories from old people who talk about days when the river was full of fish, when boats did not leak, when children went to sleep with full bellies and clean faces. You remember these stories not because you believe them, but because they are all you have left of hope. You remember your own childhood, blurred and unreliable, colored by hunger and cold, but with flashes of something else: a feast after a lucky catch, the warmth of a bigger fire, the sound of laughter echoing over the water. These moments are rare, and the older you get, the less real they seem. Sometimes, in the dead of night, you remember the taste of real food. Not the stringy, parasite riddled fish you eat now, but thick cuts of meat roasted over a clean flame, so rich you could feel the grease on your lips. You remember the sweetness of berries before the birds and the insects claimed them, the crisp bite of roots that were not half rotten. You remember sleeping deeply, waking up with more energy than aches, believing, if only for a few hours, that the world was not at always against you. But these memories do not bring comfort. They bring longing, and longing is dangerous. Out here, hope is just another form of pain. You watch your children chewing on gristle and bark, eyes wide and hollow, and you remember being that child, looking to your parents for comfort, for miracles, for answers they never had. You realize, with a sick twist in your stomach, that you are no different now than they were. You have nothing to offer but empty promises, nothing to give but another day of endurance. The elders cling to memory as if it could save them. They tell the same stories again and again, their voices thick with nostalgia and regret. You try not to listen, but sometimes you do. You hear about the days when the river was good, when the sky was clear, when there was always a surplus to trade, always something to celebrate. Maybe it was true, or maybe their minds have turned misery into myth, editing out the hunger, the cold, the constant losses. You suspect they remember not because things were better, but because now is so much worse. Sometimes you envy the dead for what they no longer have to remember. The faces that float beneath the surface of the water, the ones you pass by in silence, what do they recall, if anything, as they drift in the muddy dark? You wonder if forgetting is not a kind of mercy. You have seen old people lose their memories, their eyes going glassy and distant, their stories repeating or fading altogether. At first, you pitied them. Now, you almost envy them. To live without memory is to live without comparison, without the constant ache of what has been lost. You try, sometimes, to build new memories, small victories, small joys. A day when the boat does not leak, when the insects bite less, when you find an extra handful of berries. But the river is always there, ready to wash those moments away. The next cold night, the next empty net, the next argument with a neighbor over nothing at all, and whatever happiness you manage to scrounge is swept downstream. Even the laughter, rare as it is, seems hollow, edged with desperation and the knowledge that it cannot last. You have learned that memory is a double-edged knife. On one side, it keeps you human. On the other, it makes your suffering sharper. You watch your children, their faces pinched with hunger, their games silent and quick, and you wonder what they will remember of these days. Will they remember anything but struggle? Will they remember you as a comfort or a failure? Will they remember the sound of the river, the smell of smoke, the taste of fear? When the cold is at its worst, when the hunger burns away even your will to move, you wish for the gift of forgetting. You wish you could erase all the stories, all the hope, all the foolishness that led you to believe things could ever be different. But memory is stubborn. It sits in your chest like a stone, dragging you down, making every paddle heavier, every meal more bitter. It is a futile waste, a cruel echo that does not fade. And so you go on, dragging your memories behind you like an anchor, wishing you could trade them for something useful. One more fish, one more dry night, one less ache in your bones. You know it will never happen. You are chained to your past, and the river, with all its indifference, will wash you and your memories away soon enough. For now, you endure, you row, you fish, you curse, you remember. You listen to the stories and pretend they matter, pretend they are not just another way for misery to keep itself alive. The past is gone, the future is a rumor, and the only thing you really have is the present, a present filled with the echo of better times that will never return, and the certainty that remembering them is the cruelest joke of all. Of all the miseries the river delivers, of all the endless torments that make up the fabric of your days, it is sleep, however brief, however restless, however interrupted, that becomes your only real comfort, the one pleasure that cannot be stolen, rationed, or traded away. In sleep, there is at least the possibility of escape, even if what you escape to is just another flavor of the same old suffering. You long for sleep from the moment you wake. The hunger in your belly, the cold in your bones, the ache in every joint, these are the weights you carry all day, each one whispering the same quiet promise. Soon you will rest. Soon you will lie down. Soon you will stop moving, stop working, stop caring. That promise, more than food or hope or even company, is what keeps you rowing, what keeps you patching holes, what keeps you from walking straight into the river and letting it have you. But sleep, like everything else on the river, is never simple, never truly kind. It is always earned, always hard won. As evening deepens and the camp grows quiet, you curl yourself into whatever shape the mud and furs will allow, tucking your limbs close to your body to conserve what little warmth you have left. Around you, the others settle in, some quickly, with the exhaustion of the truly defeated, others restlessly, haunted by their own private fears and aches. You close your eyes and, if you are lucky, you slip away quickly into the heavy, dreamless darkness that is the closest thing you have to peace. In that darkness, for a short while, there is no river, no hunger, no neighbors to fear, no children to fail, no roof leaking icy water onto your face. There is only oblivion. You crave it the way you once craved food, or laughter, or the gentle touch of someone who cared about you. Nothing else matters as much now. On the best nights, you sleep deeply. Your body, numb with fatigue, drags your mind down with it, far below the surface of worry or regret. You dream, sometimes, but not of escape. Your dreams are made of old routines, old arguments, the same patch of river you see by day. In your sleep, you row and fish and patch and starve, and sometimes you wake with your hands clenching the edge of your blanket or reaching for a paddle that is not there. Still, even these dreams are better than waking. At least in sleep, the day is over. At least in sleep, you are not rowing. On other nights, sleep is a battle. The cold creeps in, And no matter how tightly you wrap yourself in your furs, you cannot stop the shivering. You shift and turn, your muscles protesting, your skin itching with the memory of 1,000 insect bites. The sounds of the night press in, the wind rattling the walls, the river muttering just beyond the door, the coughs and snores and whimpers of the people you share your misery with. You try to ignore it all, to retreat it into yourself, to find that thin crack between exhaustion and oblivion. Sometimes it works, sometimes it does not. Then there are the nightmares. The river follows you into your sleep. You dream of drowning, of cold water filling your lungs, of hands dragging you beneath the surface. You dream of empty nets, of broken boats, of faces, familiar and strange, floating past you, accusing and silent. You wake with your heart pounding, your skin slick with sweat, the taste of mud and fear in your mouth. In the darkness, you listen to the breathing of your family, to the distant howls of dogs or coyotes, to the soft, ceaseless sound of the river. You tell yourself it was only a dream, but the ache in your chest says otherwise. Sometimes you do not sleep at all. The hunger is too sharp, the cold too deep, the fear too near. You lie awake, counting the slow minutes, waiting for dawn, dreading the day, and longing for the release of sleep that will not come. You envy the children who, even in this place, can sometimes sleep the sleep of the innocent, their faces soft and untroubled for a few brief hours. You envy the old, who seem to slip away in the night, quietly, almost gratefully, never to wake. But despite all this, despite the broken, restless nature of your sleep, it is still the one thing you look forward to. It is the one mercy the river allows you, the one joy that belongs only to you. In sleep, your burdens are lighter. In sleep, your pain is duller. In sleep, you can forget, for a while, the endless cycle of work and want and fear. You can pretend, for a few stolen hours, that you are somewhere else, someone else, someone who does not wake every morning dreading the day to come. Sleep is your reward, your consolation, your only real possession. You protect it fiercely, snapping at anyone who wakes you too soon, hoarding every minute like it is gold. You measure your life in nights survived, in dreams remembered, in hours spent lost to the world. You do not pray for miracles anymore. You pray for sleep, a little deeper, a little longer, a little kinder than the night before. You know, deep down, that this is no way to live, that sleep should not be the only good thing, the only thing you crave. But the river has taken so much, has left you so empty, that even rest feels like victory. You wake every morning, disappointed but grateful, alive for one more day, desperate for one more night. And so, when the day's final misery is done, when the fire has burned down to embers, when the river outside sings its endless, indifferent lullaby, you close your eyes and let go. You fall gladly into the only joy left to you, the only escape that cannot be denied. And for a little while, at least, you are free. The morning comes not with hope or relief, but with the slow, steady certainty of another round of punishment. Before the sun is even fully awake, the cold has already found its way through the ragged layers of fur and cloth into your bones, into your heart. You lie there for a moment, eyes barely open, listening to the rhythmic chorus of coughs, shivers, and quiet groans that announce the waking of your miserable household. There is no rush. Nothing good ever waits for you at dawn. Yet you know you must rise. The day will not suffer a latecomer. You force your body up, peeling yourself away from the damp ground and the tangle of limbs and lice infested blankets. Every muscle protests, every joint clicks in complaint. Your stomach is already tight with hunger, a familiar companion, making its demands known before you have even begun to think about food. You glance around at your family, see their eyes, hollow and resigned, already preparing themselves for another day's battle with the river and the world. There is no need for words. Everything has already been said 1,000 times in 1,000 mornings just like this. You step outside into a gray, indifferent dawn. The air is wet and sharp, thick with the smell of mud and smoke, and something sour you can never quite name. The ground squelches under your feet, sending icy water seeping into your last pair of threadbare moccasins. The wind tugs at your clothes, trying to remind you that winter is never far away, no matter the season. You feel your skin tighten against the chill and your breath puff out in little clouds that disappear almost before you can see them. Your first task is the same as every other morning. Check the boat. It waits for you at the edge of the river, looking even more defeated than you feel. The patches from yesterday have already started to peel. The moss you crammed into the worst holes has turned black and slimy overnight. You crouch, your knees aching, and run your hands along the hull, searching for new leaks, new soft spots, new reasons to curse the ancestors who invented boats in the first place. There are always more. You fix what you can, knowing it will not last, knowing it does not matter. You gather your gear, the battered paddle, the net that is more knot than thread, the dull nymph, the basket that stinks of old fish and older failures. Every object feels heavier than it should, as if the river itself is trying to drag you down before you have even begun. You tie up your belt, cinch your tunic, and push your boat out into the water. The cold rushes up your arms, biting through the calluses, making you shiver, making you angry. But anger is useless as hope. You grit your teeth and climb in. The river is silent this morning, the surface flat and unwelcoming. You row out, each stroke a reminder of the fatigue that never leaves you, the aches that never heal. The water is colder than yesterday, or maybe you are just weaker. The shore drifts away behind you, and you are alone again, alone with the indifferent sky, the biting wind, and the endless hungry current. You fish because you must. You check your lines, your traps, your net. You pull up nothing, or nearly nothing. Sometimes you catch a fish, small, sickly, its belly bloated, its eyes already cloudy. You gut it, pick out the worms, and tell yourself it is enough, though you know it never is. Sometimes you catch nothing at all. On those days, you row longer, farther, risking the deeper water, the hidden currents, the places where the river hides its dead. You bargain with the river. One more fish, you whisper, just one more, and I will not complain. The river never answers. The hours drag. Your arms burn, your hands bleed, your mind drifts. You watch the shadows shift on the water, the way the sun tries and fails to warm your face. You think about the day ahead, the night to come, the endless parade of hunger, cold, and disappointment that makes up the only life you know. You watch for other boatmen, your rivals, your neighbors, your enemies. You nod or you do not. You share a curse, a warning, a scrap of information. You move on. At midday, if you are lucky, you pull in enough for a meal. More often, you pull in disappointment. You bail water, you patch leaks, you shoo away the crows that circle, ever hopeful, ever patient. The river keeps its secrets. You wonder, as you do every day, how many more days you can endure this, how many more mornings you can rise, how many more times you can drag yourself to the river's edge and pretend you are not afraid. Eventually, the light begins to fade. You paddle back to the shore, the boat heavier now, or maybe it is just you. You haul your catch, such as it is, back to the camp, to your family, to the cold embrace of your not home. You divide what you have. You eat in silence. You huddle around the fire. You scratch your sores and listen to the river outside. The cycle continues. Nothing changes. And then night comes. You lie down in the mud, wrap yourself in rags, and close your eyes. Sleep is uncertain, the future even more so. You wonder if you will wake. You wonder if it would matter if you did not. But morning will come, as it always does. The river will still be there, waiting. The boat will still leak. The hunger will still bite. And you, broken, beaten, stubborn, and alive, will rise, gather your things, and push out into the water because there is nothing else to do, because that is what you are. A boatman, not a hero, not a victim, just another small creature moving through a world that does not care, rowing against the current, because the only other option is to stop. And stopping is the one thing the river never allows. So you go back, always back, into the boat, into the cold, the hunger, the misery. You row, you endure, and you wait for another new day, already tired, already beaten, already beginning the endless fight all over again.